Hey folks, this is the video tutorial on the Paisley tile quilt. We recommend you follow our photograph written instructions provided in conjunction with this video tutorial. If you're looking for the April Soul on Facebook group, we'll leave the link in the description below. If you found this video tutorial helpful, please like and subscribe. Let's get started. To begin creating your beautiful block, first prepare your materials. Hoop up a cutaway stabilizer in the hoop and load your chosen design onto your embroidery machine. You'll also want to grab a trusty pair of applique scissors for trimming your batting and fabric. Next, layer your batting on top of the hoop and stitch down. Once the stitching is complete, remove the hoop from your machine and trim the batting about 1 to 2 millimeters from the stitching line. Now, it's time to start the applique process. Stitch the placement line for section A and carefully place fabric A right side up on top of the hoop, covering the placement line, and stitch it down. Then remove the hoop from your machine to trim the fabric about 1 to 2 millimeters from the stitching. Leave the excess fabric in the seams. Repeat the applique process for section B using fabric B. And then embroider the sad stitch between sections A and B. Next, move on to section C and repeat the applique process with fabric C. Embroider the satin stitch around section C. And then move on to section D and E, repeating the same applique and satin stitch process. To add some beautiful paisley shapes to your design, stitch the placer lines for the two outer shapes, and then place small pieces of fabric right side up on top of the hoop, covering the placement lines, then stitch them down. Now remove the hoop from your machine and trim the fabric. Embroider the satin stitch around both paisley shapes and then add the motifs to each. You'll also want to embroider the detailing on section C as shown in this diagram. For the center paisley shape, repeat the applique process using a small piece of fabric and trim it once it's been stitched down. Now embroider the motif on the center shape and then add the satin stitch around it. Finally, embroider the decorative stitch over the top of the satin stitch. Once you've completed all the embroidery work on your quilt block, it's time to add some beautiful quilting. Embroider the quilting on sections B and A. Followed by sections E and D. When you're finished, remove the hoop and trim the seams about 1/2 inch. Then hold aside until all your blocks are made. With these easy steps, you'll be on your way to creating a stunning quilt. When you're ready to join the blocks of your quilt together, the first step is to lay them out on a flat surface and determine your desired layout. This is important because it will help you plan how the blocks will be connected and ensure that you're happy with the final result. Once you have your layout in mind, start by connecting the blocks and rows. Take 2 blocks and place them with the right sides together. This means that the front of each block should be facing each other, so that the seams will be on the inside of the finished quilt. Use pins to secure the side seam, making sure the edges of the blocks line up neatly. Then, stitch the seam on your sewing machine. It is important to stitch just inside the existing border so that the stitching will not be seen on the right side of the quilt. Once the seam is complete, open it out and iron it flat. This will help the seam lie flat and make it easier to connect the next block. Repeat this process until all the blocks in the row are connected. Next, you'll want to connect the horizontal rows to each other. Take the first 2 rows and place them right sides together, making sure the seams line up neatly. Pin the seams together and then stitch just inside the existing border as before. Open out the seams and iron them flat. This will help the rows lie flat and make it easier to connect the next row. Repeat the process until all the horizontal rows are connected. Remember, taking the time to connect the blocks carefully will make a big difference in the final appearance of your quilt. With a little patience and attention to detail, you can create a beautiful and long-lasting quilt. Once you've finished sewing the top of your quilt together, it's time to move on to the back and binding. First, lay out your backing fabric on a flat surface with the wrong side facing up. Place your sewn quilt on top of the backing fabric wrong sides together and pin them together. If you'd like, you can also spray them together with fabric spray to ensure they stay in place. To keep all the layers of the quilt together, you can use a technique called stitching in the ditch. This process involves sewing along the seams of the quilt to keep them flat during the laundry process and to ensure the quilt stays flat throughout its lifetime. Stitching in the ditch creates an invisible finish on the front of the quilt, with the stitching lines only visible on the back side. To do this, make sure the bobbin thread on the underside of the quilt matches the backing fabric and use invisible thread for the top thread on the top of the quilt. Decide which seams need stitching in the ditch on the quilt. Not every seam needs to be stitched, just the main seams that will hold the central blocks flat. Once you've stitched in the ditch, trim the excess backing fabric so it's exactly 1.5 inches bigger than the quilt. This extra fabric will be used as the binding. Starting on any side, fold the backing fabric in half, then fold in half again, making sure to fold it just over your seam stitching and pin it in place. Continue folding and pinning the binding until you reach your first corner. When you get to the corner, try to make a nice mitered corner. Turn your binding in at the corner and continue folding the same way as you did for the first side of the binding. You can use an iron to help create sharp, mitered corners. Fold a final time and pin the corner in place. Continue pinning the binding all the way around the quilt. Starting anywhere, sew the binding to the quilt just inside the folded edge of the binding. If you'd like, you can change your bobbin thread to match your backing fabric. When you get to a corner, simply leave your needle down, lift the foot and rotate the quilt. Put the foot down and continue stitching in this fashion until you've sewn the binding all the way around the quilt. Congratulations, you've completed your very own Paisley tile quilt. We hope that this tutorial has been helpful and informative for you. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more tutorials and creative inspiration. Don't forget to join our Facebook group to share your finished quilts and connect with other quilters. Thank you for watching and happy quilting.